In this video essay, we want to examine the career of Elaine Sturtevant, an American conceptual artist who was most known for the appropriation of famous artworks created by her male colleagues. She would create these artworks by studying the techniques through which they were made, making her skilled in several different forms of arts and mediums. Her methods have created much discourse and debate within the art community, inspiring questions surrounding originality and ownership. Her birth name is Elaine Frances Horan, and she was born on August 13, 1924, in Lakewood, Ohio. She received her Bachelor of Psychology from the University of Iowa and her Master's from the Teachers College of Columbia University. Following her divorce with advertising executive Ira Sturtevant, she decided to keep his last name. Sturtevant began to create paintings in the 1950s, where she would flatten sliced tubes of paint onto a canvas. However, in 1964, she began to recreate other artworks. She held her first exhibition at the Bicchiani Gallery in New York, which featured Andy Warhol's flowers, Claes Oldenburg's garment, and the American flag by Jasper Jones, and an imitation of Frank Stella's concentric square, among many other works. Other famous artists who would go on to replicate include Marcel Duchamp, Joseph Beuys, Roy Lichtenstein, Paul McCarthy, and Felix Gonzalez Torres. Because of her interest in cybernetics and the digital world, she began to work with film and video in the early 2000s, artistically shifting her career. She would often use stock footage and images to examine the cultural impact they had. Sturtevant also strived to understand and interpret current affairs and political undertones in modern-day discourse. Although Sturtevant drew a significant amount of criticism from her appropriations, she is recognized as a very influential and renowned artist. In 2008, she received the Francis J. Greenberg Award, and in 2011, she was awarded the Golden Lion Award for Lifetime Achievement. Following additional exhibitions in Stockholm and Zurich, she earned the Kurt Schwitters Prize for Lifetime Achievement by the Sprengel Museum in 2013. After her passing in 2014, the Museum of Modern Art debuted a show that examined her illustrious, impactful career spanning 5 decades. In the following segments of the video, we will examine several of her artworks and discuss the implications her career had on many different art movements.
As previously mentioned, Sturtevant challenged concepts like authenticity and ownership through the recreation of other famous artworks. An important aspect of her work was that her appropriations were not mere replications. In fact, the small discrepancies between the two pieces should instead encourage the viewer to examine the artwork more closely and within their own perceptions and opinions. Today, we will talk about her most famous and controversial piece, Warhol, Maryland. It is a recreation of Warhol's Maryland depict, however with a touch of originality. In this piece, it depicts a vibrant Marilyn Monroe in vibrant colors that mostly consist of red, yellow, and cyan. However, it is contrasted in complete black and white, which gives off a more eerie look. The black and white version of the piece provides an old film feel, using darker tones in specific areas. The beautiful vibrancy of the colors clash with the black and white to demonstrate the darkness she may have. It shows the dimensions of what is to not only be Monroe, but also to exist as a woman. This relates to a similar theme introduced to us in class, about how depictions of women can encompass the experience of being a woman, as well as the stories women carry. It also allows us to create our own ideas and stories of what the piece could mean. She used the same methods as Warhol, even going as far to ask him for the original methods and materials so that she may recreate it in her own vision. Sturtevant's recreation of this art piece further influences the interpretation of it, that perhaps certain artworks convey different themes depending on the artist behind it. In class, we read about the opinions of Amelia Jones in her book, The Feminism and Visual Culture Reader, and how she views the world of art. In her book, Jones writes, Implicit in this is a suggestion that just as women have suffered when measured by the male standards, so men might be found lacking when measured by the standards of that work by which women assert softness, vulnerability, and self-exposure. Better to deny, obscure, or mystify the achievements of women than to have to be measured by those achievements. Art is seen and judged in the eyes of man, with the lack of understanding of the power and meaning that women hold within their pieces. Sturtevant takes this idea and challenges it in every way. She takes these pieces, created by these famous male artists, and recreates them in her own image, a woman's image. However, many challenged her and said that she was nothing more than an artist that took advantage of other artwork. She spoke out and once said, "My work has nothing to do with appropriation, the refocusing of history, or the death of art, or the negative questioning of originality. Rather just the opposite. It involves the power and autonomy of originality and the focus of pervasiveness of art." Sturtevant defies the norms and challenges the concept of true art. As Jones once said, "Where has obedience led women in the world of art? It has led them to do more courageous things in order to be recognized for their true potential and abilities." Sturtevant is a representation of women in a society that continues to neglect women and their voices that scream to be heard through their pieces.
Sturtevant's career and success hold several implications for the art community and has impacted different artistic trends and interpretations. However, she faced some friction from peers and critics for a large part of her career. While Sturtevant developed good relations with Lichtenstein and Warhol, Claes Oldenburg was displeased with her recreation of his 1961 store. In turn, she drew a significant amount of criticism for much of the 60s and 70s. It wasn't until the middle of the 1980s when critics withheld their disapproval and criticism for her work. This was because there was an increased focus on the meaning of authenticity and its relation to historical art movements. As she once said herself, her work was violent and mistreated, but when appropriation became a strong movement, it gave people access to her work. The intention behind her recreations were no longer abrasive to the art community, finally accepted after more than 2 decades. The poor reception her artworks received is not surprising to look back on, however. It is a recurring theme for women artists to receive unfair criticism as they begin their careers. In Sturtevant's case, the criticism can also be understood as a fundamental refusal to understand or consider the intended purpose of her appropriations. Moreover, Sturtevant's approach on cloning and appropriation predicted the impact the digital age and cybernetics would have. Now, it has become paramount to pay attention to ownership and originality regarding shared art in the modern world. Sturtevant also explained that repetition is not repeating. It is interior movement. It pushes the limitations of resemblance. We believe that it is important to note how Sturtevant exclusively recreated works by male artists. By doing recreations precisely and skillfully, she challenged restrictive notions about the professionalism and artistry of women artists. Her involvement with film and videos was also significant to current art movements. Her perspective of the digital world was essential to her art, that it is subservient to cybernetics and automated control systems, whether they exist in humans or machines. Sturtevant also described the digital world as excess, limitation, transgression, and fatigue, themes that are present in the film and videos she has manipulated. While previously knowledge was prioritized over information, the emergence of the digital age has emphasized the opposite. Similar motifs appear in her piece, The Dark Threat of Absence, fragmented and sliced, where 7 screens with distorted perceptions are arranged in a line. Sturtevant's videos and images explore concepts like repetition, distortion, and the distinction between human and camera function. Sturtevant's impressive and dynamic career has shaped art movements within the last few decades and provided a lens through which we examine authorship and authenticity in art. In her appropriations of artwork, she reclaims autonomy as a woman artist and declares a position of producer instead of muse. Though she is often overlooked in discussions surrounding postmodernism, her work is instrumental for understanding the internal structures and processes behind the creation of art. Sturtevant's collection exists as binding proof that the intention and personalization of creating art changes the reaction, interpretation, and the study of such art.
That's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you enjoyed. We would also like to dedicate this to Sturtevant, who died May 7th, 2014. We hope to see many more artists like her in the future, who are just as bold, inspirational, and creative. Thank you.